This is the Holy Gospel according to Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 through 12. Seeing the crowds, Jesus went up on the mountain, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you." This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
All right. When we talk about someone being truly blessed, what do we mean? What is this idea of blessing? When you talk about a person being blessed, when we say, Johnny is truly blessed, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Probably like he's maybe a great athlete, right? Oh, he is so blessed with so much talent, right? Or maybe he's smart in school. Oh, he got 1,400 on his SAT. That doesn't make any difference anymore, but he's truly blessed. He's got the gift of intellect or something. What about Susie? When we say Susie is truly blessed, we're probably still talking about sports, right? She's a great soccer player, right? Or maybe like piano or an instrument or something like that. Or maybe the SAT thing too. But when we talk about people being blessed, we usually talk about some kind of talent they have, right? A God-given gift or something like that. What about when we talk about a group of people being blessed? Oh, the Johnson family, they are so blessed. What are we talking about? This is an easy one, right? They're rich, right? They live in a big house. They, have nice stuff, all that. They are so blessed, right? Or maybe they just had a child and they were trying for a long time. We may use that term for that. It's interesting what we think about when we think about blessed, or when we call people blessed. It lines up with what we value, right? Pretty much. But what we hardly ever say to someone is, "Blessed are you who are suffering a great deal and struggling with life." We never say that. We don't look at somebody who's suffering and who's going through a really hard time. "Oh, aren't you blessed? Aren't you blessed? God has arrived to show you that this is not the end of the story, that your best life is well beyond this terrible situation." The only person I know that talks to people like this is Joel Osteen, right? Your best life is ahead of you. Brother Joel, I love Joel. But that's the only one that talks like this. He's Beatitudes every week. But think this through. What does Jesus say to people who are depressed, poor in spirit, those who regret and mourn the past, those who wish the world was a better place with more honest people, who thirst for righteousness, those who are persecuted for what they stand for what they believe in, for the God they follow, those who are canceled? What does Jesus say to them? Blessed are you. You are truly blessed. That's what he says. Jesus says they will be comforted. They will be satisfied. They will receive mercy. They will reside in God's kingdom. I've always been puzzled by this passage. I've always been puzzled. I grew up in California, down the street from the Hour of Power, Robert Schuller, the Beatitudes. He would always get into that every week. This is a while ago. I dated myself. But anyway, I look at this. I go to people's Christians' homes, and in the bathroom, there it is, the Beatitudes, right on the wall. You go to the Christian bookstore, same thing. It's framed up. You look at it and you think, oh, there's the Beatitudes again. Blessed are these people who are having a tough time. Does this make any sense to you? Do you just accept these blessings to these people just because Jesus said it? Don't argue with the red letters, right? I used to have the hardest time with this passage. I would see it on people's walls and I would just think, what is this? He tells people who are suffering and struggling through life, you are blessed. What is the purpose of this? And then I actually read the passage carefully, and I realize there's something here. Hold on a minute. I missed something for years. Now I understand what's happening. Jesus, seeing the crowds, went up on the mountaintop, and his disciples followed him. Maybe a few other people, but not a big group. If you'll look at this passage carefully, you'll find there are two groups of crowds. I looked it up in the Greek. That's no help. But there definitely is a difference between the crowd that's big down at the bottom of the mountain and the crowd that's big in chapter 8 at the bottom of the mountain and the few people who go up to meet him and are taught the Sermon on the Mount and who come back down with him. Those two populations are different. Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit. Down there amongst the people. Don't you church leaders get discouraged. God will comfort them. Jesus is talking to his disciples. He's talking to his missionaries, the church, about the large group that they're about to encounter over the next several years. Look at how he talks about it. Throughout the passage, it's all about them, all about them, all about them, all about them. Then all of a sudden at the end, blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kind of evil things against you falsely on account of the message that I'm teaching you. Don't worry, church. They will ridicule you for what I'm teaching you. That changes everything for me. Sorry, that was a little tangent. Jesus is inspiring his missional church to come down the mountain and to see the work of God. Despite the hardship around them, he wants them to see the positive, big picture, the ultimate work of God. Look at how it's laid out. It's all right there. He says to his disciples, those people are blessed. You are blessed. Don't worry about the persecution. God will overcome. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is in heaven. Your reward is among God's holy family, among God's holy people. There's where you'll find your reward. Remember what happened to the prophets. They hated them too. They spoke in the midst of bad times. And the people had no hope at the time. And they wouldn't listen. And they all became discouraged. But don't you be discouraged. The Beatitudes are for the church. The missionaries who are about to go out into the world. It's like that saying, this is intended for mature audiences. You know, you hear that when you're about to watch a movie. Hopefully you don't watch too many of those movies. But anyway, that's what I'm hearing in the Sermon on the Mount. That this is for the church. Now you can debate this, whether he shared this with a big group or a small group. I'm sure that, that debate will go on and on and on and on. But I want to draw your attention to two characteristics, just in case you're having trouble with this way of looking at it. He names his disciples when he goes up the hill, and they are definitely the smaller group. If you compare the beginning of the passage, the middle, and then chapter 8 after the Sermon on the Mount is over and they come back down. So just keep that in mind. Jesus is talking to his church leaders about a positive future that God is creating. Jesus is teaching them how to live in thy kingdom come, thy will be done now. And I have to say, this is a very, very attractive passage for our time today. Some of you know I had a vacation last week and I had a little time off to rest, and usually I still think about church or I still think about messages or whatever. I had one assignment last week, and that's just to write the sermon. And so as I'm on my vacation, I'm still thinking about it and whatever. And so I kind of am, on this trip to Kentucky on the Bourbon Trail with my buddies and a pastor buddy of mine. And I'm just thinking about, the what am I going to preach on? I don't know. When am I even going to start this sermon? And so I'm watching TV, the news, in my hotel room, and just kind of, YouTube and whatever in between things. And I see these talk shows and these news shows that kind of pop up. And I was blown away. Obviously, these shows were negative because they were news. What was really funny about this exercise is that all of them were negative. Every single one. And at I don't know how many I was watching, but at a certain point I started to laugh. I was like, there is not one positive show here. Everything's negative about the future, the coming crash, it's worse than the Depression, morality has just gone out the window, our government's falling apart, international, everything is, right? And I just thought to myself, it's just all negative about the future. There was not a future blessing in sight. Everything was totally doom and gloom. So I went outside of my hotel to get coffee in the early morning to get away from the negativity. And I'm in Kentucky, and I saw something very unusual. Maybe it's not that unusual. But I saw an enormous amount of people, more than I would have expected, of homeless people, people strung out on drugs, boarded up downtown windows from the Breonna Taylor sort of backlash in Louisville and all this. And I just was like, wow, this is really tough. I was like, I'm sad to see this sight. But I was so excited to be there. I was like, this is the Bourbon Tour. You're supposed to be happy. This is supposed to be a great time, a great place to visit. We're at risky row. I was having a good time with my friends. But the world around me was depressed. Even the people who weren't in that category, who kind of worked there, the wait staff and everything, they all kind of had this kind of attitude. And I thought, oh no, what's going on? The world around me is depressed. In my head, I was like, how could you be depressed? This is the greatest place ever. The trees are beautiful. The rolling hills, there's horses in all these like farms on the side of the road. It's wonderful. And there's whiskey and smoking cigars. It's a pastor's dream. I can't do this all the time. And there's good food, cheap flights, cheap hotels. This was the greatest place on earth. People from out of town were celebrating. I saw them. Why don't these people believe? Why aren't these people experiencing this? And I started to realize the difficulty that Jesus had in his own time. I started to see, oh, look at this. The people of Jesus' time were depressed. They were lost. They had no hope for the future. The Romans and all the turmoil, the economic strain, the farms that were lost, all these widows everywhere because of the wars and everything. It was a terrible time. People were going out into the desert to meet this guy named John just to have some glimmer of hope, some connection to God. The churches they were attending to, the Pharisaic churches, were just terribly depressing for them. Jesus called them brood of vipers. It was a terrible, depressing time. And they were detached from their church. And their church was very small and very exclusive. And then Jesus breaks in and educates the church about a different future. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the humble. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are the pure at heart, the ones who thirst for righteousness, because a new day has arrived. A new beginning has already begun. A new church has formed out of the remnants of the old church. And he leads them down the mountain to be blessed and to be a blessing to the masses, to bring hope of the gospel to the world. He puts the gospel in their heart. That whole entire 3-chapter Sermon of the Mount in their bosom. And he sends them out into the world to be baptizers, to be grace-filled people, to be a blessing to the community. So I will give you that same challenge. Let us have the real presence of Jesus Christ placed into our hearts by God alone through his word. And let us as a church go out into this world, down the mountain, and be a true blessing to our neighbor. Amen?